You're listening to the OK Dad Podcast.
Please leave your message for
Daddy.
OK Dad Podcast. Let's start this thing.
Can you not put that on YouTube?
You're listening to my husband talk a lot.
No one really has conversations like that anymore unless it's with people that they're familiar with. This is where the idea of the OK Dad Podcast started. So I know we met on a post online and you were like, sure, I'll jump in. So let's get started at the very beginning. Like, did you have both parents growing up? Were you a single child? Did you have siblings?
Yeah, my mom actually, I have 5 siblings, and for the most part, she was a single parent.
Oh, okay. So 5 siblings. Were you the oldest or the youngest, or right in between?
Down in between.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I have an older sister and brother, and then I have 2 younger brothers and a younger sister.
Oh man, so you were like right smack dab in between.
Yes.
What did your mom do while y'all were growing up? Did she work?
Off and on. She did receive, government assistance, but she did work, and I remember she made sure we had everything that we wanted for the most part. Like my siblings had cell phones, or like my sister, I remember she would get her nails did, and we were like 13 and 12, and like we were young. To me, I was like, ooh, that's a lot. Like,
Yeah.
she kept us in the nicest shoes. Like there were times where she didn't really have nice clothing, and we as children didn't recognize that she went without a lot, or nights where we ate and she maybe didn't. Like as I've gotten older, we've had conversations. We didn't know those things. We were happy. She cooked every night for us. We did homework. She was very present, and like I had a wonderful childhood.
Yeah, it's funny because we don't notice a lot of stuff like that when we are kids. We're growing up, and the vision that we have on the world is just what's happening today. Like let's go and let's tackle today. You wake up and you're like, okay, the next few hours. We never look at anything long term. When you look back and reflect on it now, and can you tell the nights and the times that she was working? Can you reflect on that and see what she did and how hard she was working now versus when you were a kid looking back on it? Does that do you have children yourself?
I do. I have a 12-year-old son. He'll be 13 this year. And for me, I feel like when you're a kid, you kind of see your parents as like these sort of like superheroes. You know what I mean? Like they're like these great big like beings. And then as you get older, like for sometimes for me it did. And then going into being a young adult and becoming a parent, I'm like, no, I totally get it now. Like you were doing like the best you could do. You were, like in spite of everything, you were still there, and you were an amazing parent. You did the best that you could do. You didn't leave. Things could have been a lot worse. People have such traumatic things happen to them in childhood, and I can say at the most, maybe I went without a few things that I thought I needed. I didn't get to go to that Backstreet Boy concert that I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I was good. I was safe. So.
Yeah. And now that you have your own children, and when you do reflect back on it, would you say that your mother is the one that you're trying to model your parenting after, or do you kind of take in other things too that are around, like grandparents, cousins, family member, friends, like their parenting style, or do you think you're solely trying to model after your mother's?
Well, in different ways. In terms of just the communication, the love, certain things like she did with us. Like the time she spent with us as a family. Those things I do take. It's like a take and give. Because I feel like my mom where I know I was loved and I feel like she did her best, there are certain things that I would do differently. And so that's kind of like my mindset is I took the good and things that I feel like can be done differently, I do. And I'm always open to other parents. I love meeting other parents and their style of parenting and hearing things that work for them and trying it out. If I
Yeah.
feel like it can fit my family, I try it out. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, okay, cool.
Yeah. I think that's a big step in the right direction too, especially for parents like now with people that have children between the ages of 0 to 18 really, because they're still in your household for the most part. They're still under your care, under your insurance or whatever it may be. And I feel like a generation, even 2 generations ago, were still just using what their parents did without trying to make any adjustments. And I think now, at least, we open up as parents to say, hey, there's a lot of new information. Like there's a lot of studies out there now, depending on what it is. But we can take things in and say, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Or, my parents did a great job, but maybe this one thing that they always did isn't right, especially like now in today's society, too. So I think it's good to always be able to be open to different like parenting styles, different things that come up and give you new ideas, especially I think discipline's one I think that has changed dramatically over the last few generations, just from what I can tell and who I talk to about everything. But
hmm
um, do you go by Lorraine or Lala?
I go by both. I have a few different nicknames depending on who's talking to me, but I go by Lorraine and Lala most often.
Okay. Well, Lala, as you were growing up, what happened the very first time you were gonna permanently like leave your house?
Oh wow. What did happen? Well, there's
was
been a few different things. Um,
was it something sudden, or was it something that you were like, well, now I'm kind of growing up, I gotta get all my stuff and I gotta do the next thing in my life now?
yeah, totally. My son was about almost 3 at the time. And to be honest, I was a late bloomer in like a lot of things. I was very quiet, very shy, always kept to myself. You could always find me in my room, reading, watching TV or something. And so for a long time, I honestly thought that I wouldn't leave my mother's house
Hmm.
because just I dropped out of high school. My sister was killed. She was 16. I was
Oh, I'm
17 at the
sorry.
time, and yeah, and I was already not doing so great, but I just lost a lot of motivation for school at the time, and so
Hmm.
um, and then I ended up having my son, and so I was kind of lost for a minute. So I felt like I didn't really have the things that you needed in life to, move to the next step,
Hmm.
and I think mentally I wasn't in a place to figure that out, but um, they have this they had this housing program. My son's godfather was like, "Hey, this place I'm working at, they're taking in applications for people who are homeless, and I think you should, come fill out an application." And I did. And um, 6 months later, they called and they interviewed me, and I got a place, and it was like the most amazing feeling in the world
Oh
because
yeah.
um, it just afforded me an opportunity to get to that next step. Um,
Hmm.
and it was a what did they call it? Transitional housing. So for 2 years, it's a program where they give you housing, but you also have access to a caseworker, a ton of different counselors, and just different resources. So it was a really great step for me. The first time was really just someone saying, "Hey, there's an opportunity, and I think you should go check it out." And
Yeah.
I went for it.
Had it not been for your son's godfather, do you think you would have found or stumbled upon something like that on your own?
Um, I think eventually, because I know there are some people in the world who still like frown upon government housing and things like that. But for someone like me and many people I know, uh, it does it I don't even know how to really put it into words, but it provides me with an opportunity to take care of my family, to you know work good. I get up and I go to work every day. I
Yeah.
pay my bills like everyone else, So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
I
I've
feel like
seen,
passively.
I see it like a lot of people like the way you said that. I can see that too, because there's some people that they look at assistance in any kind of shape or form and say like, hey, this isn't bad because there's people that are going to abuse this resource or abuse the system. And I had someone that I knew that worked for our San Antonio's Child Protective Services, and the stories that he would tell is that they would go into homes and then offer up a plethora of resources for them to use, and they wouldn't want to take it. That people would be homeless and they would offer all these resources and they didn't want to take it. And there's so many resources that go unused and underutilized that it's kind of sad, because we see so many people struggling and we have all these programs there to help. We even have like neighbors, churches. There's all these, how would you phrase it? There's all these like private communities, private in the sense that it's not the government, but they have those resources as
Hmm.
well, and they're trying to get the word out, and those are still even underutilized. I went to a not so great high school, and I remember they had $1,000 scholarship, just cash. And to be eligible, you had to be like in the top 50% of the class, and there was 600 students. So if 300 people had a shot to get it, and I think they had two of them, and nobody got the scholarship because nobody applied for it. So if just had one person applied for
Wow.
it, they would have given that out. And so they didn't even give out the scholarship. And that to me is, since I was brought up in that kind of environment, is everybody, I feel like, especially me and my wife, because we both went to the same school, when you're brought up like that, nobody really wants to help you up. We come from a Hispanic background here, and it's usually, even in a joking manner, if you're doing well in any kind of shape or form, like if you're driving a nicer car and you just traded one in, they're like, oh, look at him, he's spending all this money doing that. Or if you get a house, somebody's like, oh, look at him, he's buying too much of a house. Or if you're wearing nice clothes, like, oh, he's spending too much money on this clothes. And that's kind of how I was raised around that. A lot of like family and community just bashing each other, even though it's something that wouldn't even be bashing. And I think those programs too are hard to see because nobody wants to bring them up. Nobody wants to talk about it. And there are people that need them out there. Cause like you said, it's a great opportunity. It may not be something for life, but to even get you out there, get your independence too. Those are big. So as you got that, was it just you and your son in it?
It was just me and my son, and he was 3 going on 4. He was potty trained, and so I had never lived on my own. I always had a big family, and I I thought about it. I had such anxiety, and
Mhm.
I noticed that a couple of weeks prior to his moving, he started having more accidents. And because I was, getting him ready, hey, we're gonna move. It's gonna be your mommy, and you're gonna have your own room. And so once we got there, one of the resources was counseling. Well, a caseworker, and I expressed to her, I feel like my son could benefit from some counseling because
Mhm.
he's having anxiety. And so she helped me get in touch with some people. And so yeah, like you were talking about those different resources. So um, that was something we got. I got counseling for my son for a few months, which did teach me other methods of disciplining. Because at the time, I noticed when I fussed at him, he would just get louder. He was yelling at me too.
Yeah.
And so different things like sending him to his room, until he can be calm and and he can express to me what the problem was.
Mm-hmm.
Timeout was a big thing, which I got laughed at by some relatives because I come from a place where, you spank his little behind and tell him what's going on. But
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, no, I'm gonna give him a moment.
Yeah.
They also had a substance abuse counselor there where I wasn't an alcoholic, but I had expressed that, if I had money, like I would be buying drinks and like I wouldn't pick it over food, but
Mm-hmm.
it was something I felt I needed to address because at the time my sister passed for about a year, that's all I did. I just
Yeah.
drank until I would eventually cry every time I drank. So I stopped doing that. But yeah, so the substance abuse counselor, that was a resource. Counseling for myself. Um, Work, they had like a work readiness program and they taught you about interviewing. And so I took advantage of all those things. I feel like it helped me kind of put my life on track, to be honest, because,
Yeah.
like I said, I didn't really know how I was going to get from my mom's house to,
Yeah.
now, yeah,
Well,
that was.
it sounds like you had a lot of self-motivation to get yourself up to all of this. Do you think your sister's passing was something that was a big motivator, or do you think it was just you saying like, okay, like enough is enough, I have to do something, it's me, my son? Or was it just a combination of things that started leading you down that? Because like I said, we do, like, everywhere there's a bunch of resources, but they're usually underutilized. But when I see them sought out from people that are willing to seek them out, instead of, you know, they're waiting for those resources to come to them. So it looks like you were really self-motivated to say like, hey, like it's time to get up and start. And then you sought those out. And even when they're there, you were still seeking out more, which is a really good trait to have, especially in life. Cause I feel like if you get up in the day, there's always more to learn. There's always more to do. Even though I'd rather be on the couch eating Oreos, like I feel like you're a lot happier when you're out seeking like some information, some knowledge, just working, even to do a little bit better. So do you think it was a combination of things or just one big pivotal thing?
I definitely feel like it was a combination of things. Oftentimes I would think about the time I wasted when my sister passed, and um, I wasn't in a place where I could take that and use that as a motivation. I was
Hmm.
hurt and I was kind of lost, and so I just kind of, yeah, I used alcohol as a way to get through. And then becoming a parent, um, that was a huge part of what motivated me.
Yeah.
So I feel like for a time in life, I really didn't have much motivation about life. And then I had my son, and then he was my only motivation for some time.
Hmm.
And now I'm at a place where I have goals and I have dreams, and you know, I'm just mentally in a totally different place. So I do feel like at the time though, it was a combination of things.
Yeah. And as you have your son now, what are your like short-term goals or even long-term goals with him in the next few years?
Oh my gosh.
Putting you on the
To
spot,
be
right?
honest, yes. Because that's something that I've given some thought to, but yeah, that's something I really do need to think a lot on because he's going to be 13. And so we're in middle school now, and we're looking at teaching him to drive. Um, Certain things that I feel like I would have benefited knowing more about.
Hmm.
Um, saving money is so important, and I'm still trying to get myself into that mindset. So saving
Yeah.
money, being financially responsible, um, learning to drive, like talking about colleges, talking to him in a way where he's seeing himself do these things before we even come to that road. I think is a big thing too for us right now. Um, yeah, just getting him as prepared for life as I can. I
I,
had COVID-19 last year.
oh
Oh,
my
I'm
gosh.
sorry, you were gonna say something?
No, no, keep going.
Yeah, I had COVID last year, and it frightened me the thought that if I left him today, what did I leave him with? And not like material things or
Hmm.
even money, but just what did I leave him? You
Right.
know, so that's been on my mind heavy. So him having these skills in life just to take care of himself is a huge thing for me. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question, but
I think it does, because I mean, Michael, I have three right now. I have three. My daughter is gonna be 13 soon too. So she's 12. She'll be 13 in February. And I have two sons. My son's gonna be 4 next month. And then my other son just turned 5 months, 6 months. He's somewhere.
oh,
He's still a little baby. But some goals that like I have for my son is I really think he's at the age to where I believe in spanking, but not in the old school kind of discipline way. Cause now I think he's too old to be spanked, because I can reason with him. He understands talking. We can communicate. So now I don't think that spanking works. And my daughter, she's my stepdaughter, but I met her when she was 6. And I've only ever had to spank her once. And the one time that I spanked her is we were in a parade, and it was my company had a float that we were doing, and I brought my daughter with me, and she was going to be on the float while I walk on the side. And before it started, we're in the staging area, and she had taken off, and she's 6 and a half. I had no idea where she went. And so she, like, as soon as I noticed, I started searching around. I started yelling like, Cindy, Cindy, where you at? And then she came back and she's like, I found some bubbles or something, something a little kid would do. And I was like,
yeah,
no. And so I spanked her on the butt, and I told her, I was like, you don't go running off like that. And it wasn't hard enough to where it hurt, but she knew that she had got spanked. And so immediately she was just like, boom, sad. The world's ended. She got spanked. And my son, that was the only time I've ever spanked my daughter. And my son, who's now going to be 4, I feel like if we're able to reason with a lot of things, and like you said, sending him to his room, I think that's a big one that's been really turning that around with him. But he's having the terrible twos, temper tantrums that he's been having for a while. And now that we can reason with him, I think I've stopped spanking him totally, unless, and I say this is where I'm like kind of not doing it anymore, unless it's something where I feel like it needs to be immediate. Like if you ran into traffic while there's cars actively driving, that's something I feel needs to be immediate, and not just like, hey, don't run into traffic while like I'm yelling at him or something. And I
right.
think that especially here in our neighborhood, as tragic as it was too, there was a child that got hit by a car and passed away last year. So things like that, I do think those are times that merit spanks. But my daughter, trying to get her ready for life, I'm worried because she's my daughter. I'd rather have my son ready to go out in the world. I'm like, all right, let's get you ready for the world. But my daughter, I'm scared to death. And I've tried my best because I was in the military for like 10 years. And I've tried my best to not push her into it, but just like plant a seed. Cause I know if she goes into the military, she'll have a bed, she'll have a paycheck, she'll have college opportunities. And I know that that would be good for her, because I think she thrives on structure when she has it. And now I think I planted that seed, but she also really likes drama, theater arts, and drawing. She's very artistic. And
Okay.
anything that comes up drama, I'm all for it. I'm like, let's go do this drama thing. She had a murder mystery night with this improv theater group that she's a part of. And so I dressed up with her. It was like the 20s. And so I dressed up as a 20s, just guy. She dressed up as a 20s lady with a dress and heels, and she's 12. And looking at her, I'm like, oh my goodness, like you look so grown up. And it's on my
Yeah.
Instagram and it's on the podcast. I think it's one of the first things we put up on there because we're starting a new Instagram for it. And I look at it and she looks so old. She looks like she's ready to like leave the house. She looks 18 in it to me. Like she's just gonna go out and live her life. And it's heartbreaking for me. So I think this is like the perfect age, like you say, to just start getting them ready for life because it's coming, like you said.
Yeah, it is. My viewpoint at 13, I was like such in my own world that a lot of things, when they hit me, it was like, like,
Yeah.
it just shook me a little because I wasn't prepared. And then over time, like there were certain things that a lot of experiences people would say they were doing or they did. I'm like, I never did that. I never did that. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, like, cause there's this, I'm kind of big on like quotes and affirmations and stuff. So I came across this one where it said, nothing has a bigger influence on a child's life than the unlived life of a parent. And it just stuck with me and it hit
Yeah.
me. And I'm like, you know, my lack of experiences can affect him in so many different ways.
Hmm.
And not just that, but me living my life to the fullest, me going after my goals and certain things help me influence him, and
Hmm.
so just being more aware of that has really in the last couple of years fueled me to pursue different things and really think about how I'm going to help him in a sense kind of find his stuff and things he likes. So I love the fact that you have your daughter, like she's doing all these things, because I think that is something that's kind of missing right now for him, being that we're just now they're back into the school. I
Hmm.
feel like he has an opportunity to be introduced to different things that the school offer, those different activities. But
Yeah.
also, it makes me think of um, what are some things that I can find that he can just get into from home. So I
Hmm.
think that's pretty cool.
Did was he doing like the online virtual learning, or did you still have him going into school during the pandemic?
Um, for Well, it wasn't offered for a time going into school, and then when they did offer it, he went, but he didn't like it. He didn't feel comfortable, so I didn't make him continue. And I'll be honest, like this last year, distance learning was terrible for us. Like,
Yeah.
we tried, but he kept checked out for a while, and I was like, yeah, okay, we're over this. We'll have to figure it out. I know many
Hmm.
parents, children thrived during that
Yeah.
time. We were not one of them,
Yeah. Yeah, my
but
daughter was
I
not one
feel
of them
like,
either.
yeah, I mean, he's chilling on the couch. I'm like, honey, you can't be wrapped up in your blanket and you're in class. He's like, no, 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 I'm not, no, you're not, honey. Like, no.
Hmm.
um Getting him to go to bed was a fight too. And this year so far, he's been back into the classroom. He's gone to bed on his own. He's getting up. He's getting dressed. He's out the door on time. I
Mm.
didn't have to do anything. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Where did this come from? Like he has such a motivation for school right now. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So I'm trying to encourage it in any way that I can.
Yeah. My daughter, from the very beginning, I think she's a little social butterfly too. And she loved being at home because one, she didn't have to go to school, and it was winter break came, and then they extended it to 2 weeks, and then they said, "Hey, we're not going back to school at all until next year." So then they started the online learning, and
Mhm.
it was bad. I think even they extended it to the beginning of that year. I think 2 and 20, yeah, 2020, the school year. And same thing. Like she would go on, do the classwork, and then sign off, and then jump right back onto the couch and watch some TV. And my work had cut my hours in half because they were trying to not fire anybody. And my wife, who's a nurse, she had to go to work. So my wife worked the entire pandemic as a nurse. She was a home health nurse. And so it was me and her at the house a lot. And when I was at work 2 days out of the week, my wife could flex her schedule a bit. And it was the same thing. Her motivation was down, her attitude, her socialness was not where it was before. And we had just moved into the house in 2020 in January 29th. So we were here maybe a month, and then I finally got her records transferred over. So she just started going to school, and then March the pandemic hit. So she had zero time to make friends here. And after she got in is when the pandemic hit. And I don't think she recovered from it as far as like the social side of it. She has a couple of friends, but especially as a young girl in the middle school, that's when you're making like your tight friends. You're making the people that you're going to go to high school with, you're clicking with, especially now with phones. You can have a group chat set up. I have a group chat with like my buddies that I always talk to. And I don't she was still having the group text messages, but with people from her elementary school from before. So it was tough because they were all talking about stuff that's happened in their school, but she's not there anymore. She really didn't have anybody's number. She didn't know anybody around the neighborhood. So it was very fresh to her here. And I think when the school said, "Hey, we're going to do at school learning, we're going to open it up by your choice," we started making her, we're like, "Okay, well, you're going to go to school. And it's more than just, hey, because we want you to do better at school. It's because we need you to have some social interaction. That's your personality, that's your character, that's how you've always been." And she started doing a lot better. And a buddy of mine that I work with, his daughter has been not she's been doing virtual learning the whole time. And when I talk to him, he's like, "No, like I don't like it." She's kind of like how I had described my daughter, but she's been doing it for so long. He was really like, "I'm not about it, but what can we do right now? Because baby mama, they're separated." So he's like, "Baby mama wants to do this, and I'm okay with it." So I just dislike it. It's not that he was so far against it. And that was kind of what I was using to see, like, well, if we did leave her in school virtually learning, how would it affect her? And I feel like we did the right choice at the time. And now we kind of backed away from that idea altogether. And my wife actually started homeschooling. So this is the first time my wife like digs into research too for stuff. So she was like big on researching homeschool, what she could do. And she started homeschooling her this school year. And in Texas is weird because Texas, you don't have to do anything. You just tell the school, like, "Hey, I'm homeschooling." And they're like, "Okay, you're homeschooling." So it's really weird that there's nothing like formal about it. You just have to say, "Hey, I'm gonna homeschool," and then start homeschooling in Texas. And apparently there's a lot of people that are doing that, especially in Texas. And if you look at those groups, they keep talking about homeschooling, like, what do you need to do? And there's a lot of like basic questions that are already answered. But we started that, and she's doing really well. She's already read a full like chapter novel book, Treasure Island, which is a book I haven't even read, and it's a classic. So stuff like that. She has a really hard time when it comes to math, and really difficult time. So we'll be there for a couple minutes to maybe even 30 minutes just on one problem, and she'll get so emotionally invested in it that she can't even think. So now that we're homeschooling, because she's feeling that way during school, now that we're homeschooling, we're able to kind of open that up a little bit more, give her time, give her space, so she doesn't have people around her making her feel like, oh, I'm dumb. And there's other, you know, um, teachers that are in class that are making her feel that way too. So she's not going through any of that, which is nice. But as you transition your son into everything, how do you think moving out of the pandemic, do you think it'll affect him better once it's kind of gone away and we've controlled everything and there's nothing to fear anymore?
Um, yeah, I feel like socializing is a huge part of it for him as well. Him being able to be with his friends and they're hanging out and doing their little thing. I think that's important. For me, that is something that I loved about going into middle school. I feel like it was a whole nother world. Like
Hmm.
these kids are having conversations. I'm like, they're cursing. Like, what? But there's no adult. It's like, just I got more of a sense of more of my independence, honestly,
Yeah.
when it came to middle school. And it was really cool. And I hated that his sixth grade experience, he didn't get to experience any of that. He was
Mm,
just chilling at the house.
yeah.
So now that he's there, um, he has different teachers. He's learning. He has to, establish a routine. You have a structure of classes you have to get to on time. You have to manage your time. Like all these kind of things, I feel like come from that experience of being more responsible. And now you have homework from that. You're not just being held accountable in this class, but you have multiple classes.
Yeah.
Like it's just all those things. I'm happy and excited for him to be experiencing now, and it's still really scary because COVID is still very real,
Hmm.
and people are still dying from it. But you know, I guess it's getting better. Where people are getting vaccinated, less people are getting sick, and so as long as we're able to, I'm going to send him to school. And
Yeah.
he's even more enthused about doing the work. Like he came home
Yeah.
and did homework. Like I didn't have to say, "Hey, son, where's your homework?" He was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, I'm gonna sit down." And I know, for some other parent that may be like totally normal, but for me, my preteen coming in and it's like he's just ready to go. I'm like, okay,
Oh
I
yeah.
like this.
Yeah. That's definitely a plus. Lorraine, as you raise him, is it just you or do you have help from anybody? Like, is your mother helping you? You have family members that are also helping you too? Not in a big way, but just as to be there as role models for him too. I would say for myself, some big role models that helped raise me were probably my grandparents on both my father's side and my mother's side. Is there anyone like that for him in his life?
Yeah, my mother, she's like, that's home. He'll tell me, I'm going home, which is Nana's house. He has a godfather, he has uncles. Um, his father is in his life. Unfortunately, over the last year or so, he's had a lot of health issues. And so he's not really able to be present like that. So
Hmm.
um, that's been a really big, hard thing to deal with. But yeah, he does. He does have other people, and right now he has a mentor that he meets with once a week, also, and so that's very important to me that he does have
Oh yeah. I
that.
think I think having role models and then especially a support system of both female and male is important in everybody's life because especially growing up, you need someone to know like this is how a woman acts, this is how a man acts, this is how a woman treats people, this is how a man treats people. And growing up, if you don't have somebody like that, you can it can get tricky, especially with a child not knowing how to treat people or how to act or they don't know how to act because they don't have role models there that are teaching them like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. Or it doesn't matter who's going in the door, you hold the door open for everybody. Stuff like that I think is
Right,
where it comes into play because you can't be there as a parent as much as we'd love to be there all the time. Like we can't be there all the time to have somebody else even reinforce like, hey, this your mom said you should be doing this and this is what you should be doing. And as a kid, I remember like, oh, I thought my mom was just the only one. I thought that was my mom. She had that. She wanted me to do this. Like now I know, like, oh, my whole family wants me to do this. My mom's onto something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he does have a host of aunts and uncles and even older cousins. So we're fortunate. We do have a village. So.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely what you need. Well, it sounds like you're killing it, Lorraine. Um, you also
Thank you.
you did start or are starting your own podcast.
Yes, I did. I started my own podcast.
You want to talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. So I've kind of heard about podcasts and I've listened to a couple and then I don't know, I just got the idea that it might be cool to talk about some things myself.
Yeah.
And so I laugh because I have like 4 episodes that I have, put out.
Hmm.
And so I know afterwards, like doing more research, I hear people talk about how they maybe do like several like test shows or, just to kind
Hmm.
of work out the kinks. And so, you're kind of growing with me. I actually recorded my first episode and I put it out. And so
Yeah.
just the my mom's TV, her coughing in the background, or my niece, her kids running around laughing, crying in the background, you know, are they're in there in the earlier episodes, but
Hmm.
I'm really enjoying it. Some of the topics I feel like it's more of I guess, a personal journal slash like it's about adulting. I feel like I'm
Hmm.
just talking about different things that we experience as adults. And so one of the topics is um, introduction to dating. That's like the first episode, and
Hmm.
how we view dating from the perspective of during the pandemic, and then also when I was younger, the outlook of it. Another topic is you shouldn't smash anyone you can't call in an emergency. Um, and the podcast is called Out of the Box with Lala because I have these out of the box conversations, and yeah, the more I look into the world of podcasting, some of them are kind of out there, kind of out of
Yeah.
the box. And some of them are kind of more, I feel like, refined, and I'm like, okay, I feel like I would like to fall somewhere in the middle. I
Yeah.
do have um, topics of substance, but also more of a carefree way of, you
Hmm.
know, discussing, approaching them.
Yeah. That's where I think podcasting is beautiful because if anybody has an idea, they can let it be out there. They can talk about it in full, not just a clip or a meme or something that's everything's such like a flash. Like here it is. Okay, it's gone. Like let me scroll up or let me go next. Podcasting, it's as long as you want it to be. And
Hmm.
I really like that. I think you did good by just having the 4 episodes and then boom, like here it is. I tell you, I started like that. I bought my mic, had it for maybe a year and a half, and then the pandemic hit, and then I had time on my hands, and I was like, okay, now I guess is the time to start the podcast. But I still for that whole year, I was just waiting, like, let me think of ideas, let me think of what I want to do, let me think of a niche, like what can I do? And I didn't think of anything. And I love listening to podcasts. And as I was listening to some, at the time my job had me driving for maybe 6 to 8 hours a day. And some days I wouldn't drive at all. But for the most part, when I was doing these long drives, I would run through like my favorite 100 songs. And after about 4 weeks of that, I wanted to start listening to something else. So I started listening to podcasts. And after that, I was listening to a lot of like financial podcasts because I had never gotten any kind of financial literacy from my family, from anybody. And so I started listening to that, and it helped my outlook financially, got my wife involved. We started shifting our ideas. I started listening to a lot of like real estate podcasts, which I thought it would be boring, but I loved it. I ate it up. And then I was like, you know what? Like with the kids being here, my wife, like let me look for something that is just us, just people talking about different ideas. Because I don't really care if somebody famous has a thought on how to raise kids, or somebody famous has an idea on like what do you do in this hard situations. Like I want to know how people like me handle situations. I want to know how everybody's going through life, not some politician or some movie star or some rock star. And I couldn't find one. I couldn't find just like a dad talking about stuff, or like a mom just saying like, hey, this is stuff that's going on. And that's how I came up with the idea. Like, hey, well, I don't mind talking to people. I talk to maybe 3 or 4 people that I've never talked to in my life on a daily basis with my job. And it's usually supposed to only be for 30 minutes. Like they buy a car with us, and I go and I would drop the car off, and then I would talk to them, and then we'd leave. And it was getting to the point to where if I only had 1 or 2 customers and I would drop the car off and they were friendly enough, I'd be talking to them for a full on hour just about life and where they grew up and what they've gone through. And there's so many interesting stories out there, and there's so much insight from somebody that you probably would have never met if you hadn't gone out of your way to talk to them, that I wanted to kind of start archiving those moments. And also too, what I think is really good, especially if you're a parent, is if you have a podcast. And it sounds morbid to me because I bring it up to my wife, but if you have a podcast, you're kind of cementing your personality and your ideas somewhere. So if God forbid anything were to happen to you, your children, your family have something to look back on. Instead of a photograph or a video, they have something that's you sharing your ideas, sharing your thoughts. And I think that's something that's really needed, is to have something like that. And that's where I think, especially as a parent, when you're able to create something like that and put it out there. I have a couple of episodes that are just from my point of view where I don't have a guest. And I have an episode, one episode I'm just talking about Sasquatch, about the time that I may or may not have met Sasquatch when I was in the army. And my wife was telling me, well, you're talking a lot about the military in the first like 10 to 25 minutes of this. It's really heavily military on it. Like maybe you should redo the episode and then just put it out with the story of the Sasquatch part. And my rebuttal to her was like, well, it's your podcast, you're creating it, you're putting out what you want to. But those kind of short stories, I told her, if you think about it, if something were to ever happen to me, or if I get dementia, Alzheimer's, something happens to me when I'm old and the kids want to know more about me, I don't expect my kids or my family to listen to every single podcast. It's great if they do. But if my kids are able to go in and look at that later in life, they'll know more about their dad. They'll know more about their father. So I think that when you come at it with that aspect too, you're going to get some really good, your ideas are going to be out there. And it's almost like you're talking to your son or your daughter in the future, which is one way that I've been looking at it. And it feels really cool to me.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't even really think of it in that way, but I think that is a good way to look at it.
Yeah. But Lorraine, as we kind of close this out, I usually ask all my guests at the end of the show, if you had all the moms, all the dads, everybody listening to you at this moment, what would be one final piece of life advice or insight that you would give to everybody if they were all listening to right now and they're like, all right, Lala, you got me. Let me sit down and listen. What would be something that you would tell them?
Um, hmm, well, I guess it would be that family is the most important thing. And as long as you have each other and you make loving on each other, um, I feel like the one of the major focal points, I feel like you'll be okay. Um, I'm heavy on telling my son I love him and just creating those moments. I know because like we had a moment we were playing board games and he was like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, one day you're gonna look back and you're gonna be happy that I dragged you in here and made you sit down and play all these board games with me. And, so yeah, that's my thing. It's just family. You're blessed to have them. Love on them. And embrace those moments. 'Cause at the end of the day, when we're gone, like I know for me, that's
Mm-hmm.
gonna be one of the biggest things. My baby and the moments I have in him. So.
Well said. Well said. Well, Lorraine, I do appreciate you coming on again to the OK Dad podcast. Do you want to mention your podcast name one last time before we sign off?
Yes, thank you. It's Outta Tha Box, OUTTATHA box with Lala.
All right.
And it can be found on Anchor or Spotify. Sorry.
Oh no, you're good. And then I'll get a link and I'll post it in the show notes too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Lorraine. We'll see you.
Hello.
I don't know where you got all that from. I've never said that.
What are you listening to, Asher?
That podcast.